Welcome back to another Reaper log tutorial. Today we're going to talk about Super 8. And if you missed the previous video about Super 8, you can check out that interview with Tycho and linked down below. Now that I've had that call with Tycho and I've had some time to play with Super 8 on my own, I figured it's time to do kind of a demonstration and go into a little bit more depth on the various features of Super 8 and using it. So that's what we're going to do. Let's get started. So here is Super 8. This is one of the stock plugins that comes with Reaper. It's a JS format plugin. It only runs in Reaper. With the JS format, you can actually edit and modify the plugin. If you hit the edit button here, you'll get to all the code that is inside of this plugin that makes it work, but also in this purple text here, this is all hints from the creator, Justin. A few times in that video, we were referencing Justin, and that's Justin Frankel, the creator of Reaper, Super 8, and everything related to Kakos Incorporated. We've got 8 cells, which are loop memory slots. Each of these cells can contain a loop, which is just recorded audio. The first loop determines the length of all the other loops. The loops can be shorter, but they can't be longer past the first loop. Once it gets to the end of the loop, it will actually continue recording over top of itself. So you can actually loop within single cells. But at that point, it's a destructive recording. So you can't undo a layer within a single loop. The way I have mine set up is for 4 stereo loops instead of 8 mono loops. So that's just this little button here that links pads 1 and 2 together. So pad 1 selected, or cell 1 selected, cell 2 selected, and with this button here, they're both linked, and you get left and right for stereo recording. The layout is flexible. You can have it kind of wide like this or tall like this. Below that, we've got different ways of modifying the original loop. We have halve, double, double no repeat, crossfade, shortened loop. And so once you record a loop, you can cut its length in half by just truncating the last section of it, reducing its length by half. Doubling would double the length of that loop. But once you halve it and then double it, you don't get back that original recording. So to say that in another way, if you recorded 2 bars, reduced your loop length to 1 bar, and then doubled it to get 2 bars again, you would only have that first bar. So it doesn't really work the way like non-destructive recording inside of Reaper works. Double no repeat is going to increase the length, but it's going to put in a gap of the same length. Below that, we've got play all, record play selected, add to project, and kill. So play all will play all of your loops simultaneously. Record or play selected uses this select function. Usually you wouldn't use the mouse for this, but this record play selected button controls that. So if I did that and then that, and I go to this one and record, and so those are playing, and now these ones are stopped. And if I hit it again, it records again, and kill all will erase everything. So you can control things with the mouse, but if you're also playing guitar or playing drums or something, it's not really possible. So the most common way of using this is with foot controllers. The small squares in each cell, there's a record, a play, and a select parameter that you can link through MIDI. It can be MIDI note, it can be MIDI CC, it could be MIDI program change messages. You can tap, right-click to go between off and note mode. Click it again, and you'll see an orange CC come up there. So now it's expecting a CC 39. Click it one more time, and we're at PC, which would be a program change, number 39. And click it again, it goes back to off. When the cells are linked with the stereo mode, you only need to MIDI learn one of those 2 cells. You can also try sending in a MIDI signal. So I'll just click this button on my MIDI foot switch, And then it's a Command Alt right click, and then it will automatically assign that MIDI command, which in this case was CC number 40 to this pad. Essentially, you're going to set each of your record and play buttons to buttons on your pedals, as well as probably the play all button, possibly the halve and double buttons, and most likely also the kill button. Next, we're going to talk about monitoring. So each cell has its own monitoring mode. You can see here that cells 1 and 2 are set to always on, which is the yellow mode. Right-clicking on the button will cycle through the modes. So when it's blue, it will be only when selected or only when it's recording. Right-click again will make it always on, and then monitoring off. So what I found to be the most helpful for me is to have one set of cells to be always on, and then all the others are monitoring off. If you had different types of instruments coming in, you might actually have to have them all monitoring on all the time, or else there's the dedicated output for monitoring, which if you have this track set to 10 outputs, you would have a dedicated monitor out. That's a mono signal, so I don't actually use that in my template. So that's what's worked for me. If you have them all set to auto, what I found was that you don't hear anything unless you click on and select one of the cells. Monitoring it, you don't hear anything. You don't hear your guitar coming through Super 8 unless you have a track selected, and every time you hit kill, it will unselect a track, so you don't hear anything. I had to keep clicking into the track or into a cell to select it so I could hear it. So I didn't like that. The second thing is, if you can live with that and only hear yourself while you're recording, once you get into the second loop, you tend to hear your volume double each time. So that's no good either, and that's how I ended up with this setup with one set always on and all the others not monitoring. For me, that works, but definitely figure out what's the best workflow for your setup. We will come back to talking about the MIDI Footswitches in a bit, but for now, we're going to go into the project template that I have set up. So this project is pretty simple. Because I'm using stereo loops, I'm able to reduce the number of tracks here, but you could have up to 8 outputs from Super 8, all independent loops going to separate tracks. So we're actually going to start with the input track. In my project is track number 7. On this track, I just have amplitude, and it's just a simple kind of moderately distorted setup with some tape echo. This track is monitoring input so that I can hear that amp, but it's also set to record disable or input monitoring only. I actually don't want to record the DI track. If I hit record, it would record onto this track. But I want everything to go through Super 8 and just get the processed loops through there. This track is not going to the master. It is routed directly to the Super 8 track on channels 1 and 2. The next track in the template is my controller track, and this is getting all the MIDI inputs in here so that I can send MIDI CCs into Super 8. You could also set up the Super 8 track to have your controller input, but having it on a dedicated track may be preferable. And so this is sending out MIDI only to the Super 8 track. So now I've got a folder for Super 8. I just called the track Looper, and within it there are 4 loop output tracks, and then the Super 8 track where I have the plugin. And if I look at the routing, you can see the input, which is a audio input for the input track, the MIDI input for the controller track, and then 4 outputs, which are going from output 1 and 2 to input 1 and 2 on loop 1. Output 3 and 4 from Super 8 go to 1 and 2 of loop 2. 5 and 6 are going to the loop 3 track on channels 1 and 2. And loop 4 is receiving 7, 8 from Super 8 to channels 1 and 2. And the Super 8 track is not going to the master. If you didn't have that, you would hear channels 1 and 2 doubled all the time. And like I mentioned earlier, there is that dedicated monitor track. There's also a click output from Super 8 if you want to have those. And in that case, you just add 2 more tracks to your template and send them channels 9 and channels 10. On the looper folder track, I also have re-xcomp just to kind of manage the levels a little bit. I also have Echo Boy Jr., fairly dry mix here, only about 25%. And that's just to kind of give a little bit of space, and it kind of reduces clicks and things, and it blends that loop recording a little bit nicer. And now we're going to talk about the MIDI foot switches. I've got a couple here. I wish I had a better option for my own setup, but this is what I've got. I have the BeatBars FS3. It's a 2 programmable foot switch, USB out, MIDI out. USB is obviously into the computer, and there is some software to set up what each thing does, and I've got them set up for momentary buttons. This one is CC40, this one is CC41, I think. It doesn't really matter as long as what is being sent out is also being received or set up in Super 8. The next one is the AirTurn BT200 S4. It's actually a Bluetooth MIDI pedal. When this is on mode 7, it sends MIDI CCs and it's fully configurable. I have had some Bluetooth issues with this over the past week. That's been really frustrating. Frequently, it's been disconnecting on me. And I've been doing some troubleshooting, and hopefully today it actually works for us. So this connects to the computer over Bluetooth. And yeah, it gives you 4 programmable buttons, which I have set up as momentary buttons with CCs 36, 37, 38, and 39. There are much better controllers out there, but these are the ones that I have. Not really endorsing these. The BeatBars one works great. The AirTurn one, I'm not sure where the trouble is, if it's this device or if it's my Mac. But yeah, I have been having some problems with it, and it's not an instant recommendation. All right, so I've got my Telecaster hooked up, and I've got Super 8 here. That's my tone that I'm going to be recording. And I don't have a camera on the floor to see the pedals, but basically I just have the AirTurn set for the 4 different loops that I'll be recording, and then I've got a play all button and a kill button. So I'll just go through some of the functions here. I'm going to tap my foot on the first button, which will start recording on cell number 1 and 2, and I'll play something, and then when I tap the button again, it will go into play mode. And that happens because I have the same MIDI CC set for recording and play. Basically goes through in sequence. If I tap that button a 3rd time, it will take those cells out of play mode and just keep that loop in memory. If I tap it a 4th time, it will start recording over and erasing that loop. So here we go. All right, so that loop is stored, and if I want to play it again, I better not press that first loop button because that will erase it, but I can press on my second foot switch the play all button. Okay, the next thing I want to bring your attention to is the Latch mode, which is up here at the top. Left click on this to change the mode. Latch on will sequence your button presses to fit your loop length. So it's only going to change at the start or end of a loop. If I start playing that first loop and then tap on the second foot switch, it's going to wait until that loop repeats before it starts recording. I can tap it any time again within that loop as it's recording. And when it gets to the end, it will come out of record into play and start playing automatically. If I want to stop anything, and this is kind of where I don't really like Latch mode, it has to continue an entire loop before it stops. If you're not used to that, your pedals can seem really unresponsive and you're not sure what's happening, but it's just that Latch mode waits until the end of a pattern. And I don't think there is a way of actually changing that so that it's like it waits for, I don't know, a quarter note or something like that. Yeah, so we'll just start with that loop and then we'll add on to it. Hit the button. I'm going to replace that loop. But I got to wait because we're in Latch mode. So it's going to go into play mode next. Actually stop. And now I'll record something again. I didn't have my volume up. And right now, because I didn't hit that button at the start, it's playing over itself. It's recording over itself. So not a great loop. I hit the play all button to silence everything, but it's got to wait till the end of the loop. So not ideal, but kind of useful. It gets you perfectly length loops. With latch mode off, which is where I tend to play, you can have very long or very short loops, and any additional loop over that will it'll be instantly recording and playing and stopping as you press the button, which is more intuitive, I think, but also more potential for making things slightly too short, slightly too long. I find I look at the screen a little too much in this mode, so I don't know. It's just all about becoming comfortable with it, really. Yeah, not so great. If you don't know what you're going to play, then it's much harder to loop this stuff. When you're not in a live situation, obviously, you can afford to mess up. But yeah, I just didn't practice anything. So if I want to take out any of these loops now that they're playing, I just tap that button again. They instantly come out. Once you have some things recorded and you want to keep that permanently, because this is all just kind of stored in memory right now. This stuff isn't actually on the hard drive right now because it's July 22nd at 12:08 p.m. and none of these things here are from today. So when you want to actually add them to your project and save them permanently, they just have to be playing and then hit the Add to Project button. And you can stop it. And if we're looking at the project folder under Date Modified, you can see that there's these 3 loops. Looking into the project, they get added to the top of the project. I kind of wish they were actually in the same place. So like loop 1 should be under the loop 1 track. It's not, but that's fine. They're just, I think they need to take into account that it's going to be in a folder. I think it'd be fine if it wasn't in a folder. You can also sync it to your project or to playback. So Super 8 will only run while Reaper's transport is running. I've been using this with sync off. If you're using Super 8 within a project that already has lots of tracks recorded, you're probably better off using one of those other modes. So things like, your loop lengths are always exactly the same as the rest of the project. Things like that. You can also control these things with automation. You can add MIDI items with CC commands to control things like starting and stopping recording on any of the cells. If you can pre-plan what you want to do, all that stuff can be programmed within Reaper's MIDI items rather than using a foot controller. There's one more thing that I want to show you. We're going to keep it in latch off. We're in sync off. And I just want to show you like what happens if you do a really short loop. You can just kind of make these drones. And also, if you start layering on top of a single loop, it can be kind of weird. I'll turn these down. So we got this drone going. So that was looping several times, recording over itself several times. I'm gonna get rid of that one. Let's just add in some lower notes here. Okay, and then we're gonna hit halve. And so that's shorten the loop. Until it's just a buzz, but doubling it just repeats it within the item and it still sounds the same. Double no repeat. I don't know, sometimes it glitches. And that's the same kind of behavior that I've seen with hardware loopers. Let's have that again. Crossfade shortened loop. All right, let's kill all. Try to do that for real. Oh, that was bad. So I'm not sure what makes the double no repeat function sometimes stretch the notes and sometimes leave a gap, but it's pretty cool. And it reminds me of one of my hardware loopers that I've got, the 16-second digital delay from Electro-Harmonix. I don't actually use the loop mode very much, but I use the short delay function, and you can do things like changing the length of the loop while switching it between pitch and time mode. In pitch mode, it changes the pitch. In time mode, it changes the speed without changing the pitch, and it just makes some interesting glitches. And I'm a big fan of that. So the halve and double no repeat functions in Super 8 really remind me of that. So that's it. There's a kind of a review or overview of Super 8, how I've learned to use it, some of the possibilities with it, and hopefully this has been really interesting and helpful for you. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Support the Reaper blog through Patreon, and visit reaperblog.net for a lot more tutorials.